Fantastic. All right, next panel coming up. This is always a good one. Your prescription for firearms freedom. Now, I always say when I close my show out, I'm filling your prescription for freedom. These guys really are. These are the MDs that fill your prescriptions for freedom. Sean Brodale, emergency medicine physician, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership member and promotions. Dr. John Adine, you probably know, MD, pediatric surgeon, super guy and a close friend. And Robert Young, MD, distinguished fellow of American Psychiatric Association. He's an author and a professor. You guys know the routine. I'll let you go however you want. You've got 10 minutes apiece. Tear it up.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Brodale. I'm an emergency room physician, and I'm outreach director for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I just want to excuse our director, Dr. Arthur Persbinda, who was on the schedule, but he wasn't able to make it here today. Year after year, DRGO has brought to light the bias that the mainstream medical establishment has against our right to keep and bear arms, and the supposed medical research that bias encourages. Now, this creates a false image that all of medicine and all of doctors think the same way. This has reached new lows this year, as doctors have begun to use political affiliation in their research in attempts to make the President Trump's administration appear associated with drug abuse. A recent article by Dr. James Goodwin tries to make this connection. It's called The Association of Chronic Opioid Use with Presidential Voting Patterns in U.S. Counties in 2016. We can see there's a lot of problems with that just from the title. But there's more problems with that than just the research itself. Number one, a respected medical journal actually published this study. And it's completely politically driven. There's really no science to this. There's certainly no medicine to this. Number two, they attempt to associate a problem in society, drug abuse, with the President of the United States actually even before he was elected, therefore providing evidence to their assertion that Republicans are deplorables. The fact that Donald Trump won more than 85% of counties in the U.S. makes it impossible to not associate something with his presidential election, if it's even fairly common in the U.S. And in reality, this epidemic started way back in the Clinton administration and increased in the Obama administration, number one, number two, and really has nothing to do with this administration. So, what does all this have to do with gun rights and the Second Amendment? Well, number one, if they can discredit the Trump administration, they think that they can win the next election and start pushing their gun control agenda again next election cycle. But number two, they make these sort of associations all the time. This is what they do with their gun violence research. They take something that is out there in society that's maybe that is a problem, and they associate it with something that isn't the problem. So they take what they call gun violence, and they blame it all on the inanimate object, the gun, and instead of associating the crime to the criminal. Let's look at one of those articles and see how the logic follows there. Anupam Jena, a professor at Harvard Medical School. Now, most people would think, okay, a professor at Harvard Medical School, this is someone who is reputable, someone who we should listen to. Us doctors here at DRGO understand that anything coming out of Harvard Medical School is probably going to have a pretty strong anti-gun rights bias. On top of that, this was just a published letter, but published as it was in a journal, it's still out there. But as a letter, it's not going to be peer-reviewed. It's not going to go through the scrutiny that actual research article is going to. But it was presented, and then it's seen by many, whether it's the general public or whether it's the mainstream media, as real science. So Dr. Jenna's letter was entitled, Reduction in Firearm Injuries During the NRA Annual Conventions. So he asserted that because experienced firearm owners go to the NRA convention and they are not using their guns, that the amount of injuries is going to go down. So he says, let's see if we can follow this logic, because it's tough. These guys never have straight logic, but let's see if we can follow it. 80,000 plus NRA members. I bumped the button, my fault. Okay, so 80,000 NRA members go to the NRA National Convention. During that time, he asserts that these gun owners are not using, cleaning, or practicing with their guns. He also asserts that these gun owners that go to the National Convention are more experienced, older gun owners, which may or may not be true. There's a lot of people who go to the NRA convention. So then he takes and he measures accidental gun injuries presenting to emergency rooms before, during, and after the National Convention. He uses data from a single national insurance company. Now, you know there's a lot of insurance companies out there. Not sure how he picked this one, but I'm sure it worked for what he wanted to do.
Selection bias.
Selection bias, yes. So he found, here's what he finds. Overall number of accidental firearm injuries that presented to the ER that week of the NRA convention went down compared to the 3 weeks before and the 3 weeks after. So he concluded that those more experienced gun owners must be getting injured during those other times because those injuries went down while they were busy at the NRA convention. Now, there's a few more flaws than the obvious ones here. Number one, there is no information whatsoever in his research whether the people that he studied were even NRA members or if they went to this convention. He just studied emergency room visits. Now, we know that there are at least 100 million gun owners in the U.S. We also know that those polls are painstakingly low because none of us are going to answer yes if someone calls us up and says, hey, do you own guns and how many? So, we're going to go with 100 million because it's easy for numbers. Only 6 million of those members are even NRA members in the first place, which is a great number, but it could be a lot higher. And 80,000 of them went to the most recent national convention. So that's less than 0.1% of gun owners were at the NRA convention that week. And these are the people that he thinks he's studying. He only used data from one insurance company. We already talked about that. Yet, he still comes to the conclusion that experienced firearm owners are dangerous because he wanted to come to that conclusion. The problem is, it's all about perception. You have a Harvard graduate med school professor preventing what appears to be research. The public and the mainstream media believe it and believe it to be true. These are the types of issues that we deal with DRGO every day, and we recognize the public has the perception out there that doctors have a lot of education, they should be looking out for their patients, and they should be giving us the right information, but they don't. These are the things, this is our mission at DRGO, to serve as a guard against bias, policy-directed pseudoscience that would hinder gun ownership under the guise of legitimate science. We're proud to be here with the rest of you, fighting for our Second Amendment rights against all of this anti-gun crowd in society today. Thank you.